So we celebrate birthdays for two main reasons. One is to acknowledge the hard work and dedication that it takes to get 24 hours of sobriety, a week of 24 hours strung together, a month or years. And no matter how much time you have, it's hard work, and we know that. And the second, and maybe the most important reason, is that by celebrating birthdays, it gives others hope and inspiration that it can be done, no matter where they're at in their sobriety journey. So it's important to stand up when we have these opportunities and be acknowledged, because if you're celebrating 24 hours, it gives hope to somebody who's still struggling. And if you're celebrating 1 week, it gives hope to somebody who has 24 hours, and so on. So I remember a birthday meeting that I was at back in 2003. And if I hadn't attended that meeting, and if I hadn't heard particularly two messages that were delivered that night by people who were celebrating birthdays, I might not be sitting here today. And the first one was from a young lady who was 23 years old, and she was celebrating 1 year. And I am always in awe of young people who get a handle on their recovery that early in their lives. And so that was really powerful for me to listen to that. But the second one was from a guy who was celebrating 23 years. So it was kind of interesting. He had been drinking, or he had been sober for longer than she'd been alive by a matter of days. And his name was Rick W. And he was there from Saskatchewan as a guest at my home group that night. And his story was very interesting, because we know that when we go to meetings, we hear a little bit of our story over and over again, and that's what kind of helps us to normalize what we're going through and feel a little bit better about who we are. But Rick told his story, and he said that what had happened for him was in the first year of his recovery, he had gone to AA meetings just about every night, and he'd driven from the AA meeting to the liquor store afterwards. And the powerful thing for me was that that's exactly what I had done for the 12 months leading up to that night when I showed up for that birthday meeting. So it was really important for me to hear that message of hope, because I went, you know, if this young lady can do this, and if this guy can do it after doing exactly what I've been doing for the last 12 months, there's hope for me as an alcoholic that I might be able to get sober and stay that way and shoot for that 23 years, one day at a time, just like Rick W. had. So our scripture tonight is about hope. The title of tonight's message is Discovering Hope, and it's from John 5, verses 5 to 9. And we're in June, so we're still working our step 6. So is it possible to say that we're entirely ready to have God remove all of our defects of character? I think if we think in terms of all or nothing, we may get stuck there. It's important to remember that nobody can work the steps perfectly. Our part is to keep working them and to get as close as we can to being ready, and then let God do his work in us. This story from the book of John shows us the importance of hope and of being ready for the time when God, through his unconditional love, shows us the way. In Jerusalem, there was a pool where people went hoping to experience miraculous healing. Do you have the scripture up there now, Justin? I may not be following it exactly here, but... So this starts with verse 1. Afterward, Jesus returned to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish holy days. Inside the city, near the sheep gate, was the pool of Bethsaida, with 5 covered porches. Crowds of sick people, blind, lame, or paralyzed, lay on the porches. One of the men lying there had been sick for 38 years. When Jesus saw him and knew he had been ill for a long time, he asked him, "Would you like to get well?" "I can't, sir," the sick man said, "for I have no one to put me in the pool when the water bubbles up. Someone else always gets there ahead of me." Jesus told him, "Stand up, pick up your mat, and walk." Instantly, the man was healed. He rolled up his sleeping mat and began walking. This man was so crippled that he could not make it farther on his own. But he camped as near to the water as he could, so there was hope for his recovery. God met him there and took him the rest of the way. That sounds a lot like step 6 to me. It's about getting ready, wanting to change bad enough that we're ready to let our higher power take us the rest of the way, which is step 7, which we're going to start talking about next month.
When we thought about having somebody speak on birthday nights to give a sense of hope and encouragement to everyone else, this young man's name came to mind. It was because I was working with Bobby. He had extreme anxiety, social anxiety, so great that he wouldn't likely get onto the train. He wouldn't talk to anybody on the train. That was, about 6 months ago, eh, Bobby? And he's been working so hard on that part of his life and trying to make things better. He too is in drug court and doing extremely well. When I asked him, he looked at me and he said, "I don't want to do it, but I will. I will." And he's been texting me and calling me, and we've been meeting together, and he said he's ready and he's going to do it. So with his social anxiety, I am so proud of you, Bobby, that you're going to come and try this. This is awesome. So give Bobby a big round of applause, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Rob and I'm an extremely nervous addict. My story starts out pretty normal. I come from a middle-class family that separated when I was pretty young. I was a straight-A student, but would get bored in class very easily, and this constantly got me into trouble almost daily. I never really did too much drugs or alcohol till I was 18. Usually if one of our friends stole a bottle or some weed, that'd be about all. My family and I moved around a lot, so I never really made true friends, and meeting new ones was always hard. So I became a chameleon. I was able to fit into any group, but never truly fitting in anywhere. Wearing masks is something I had mastered throughout my addiction. Creating trouble and fighting became a normal, and my grades started slipping. With barely any effort, I could still pass everything, and I figured this would be okay. But because of all the trouble I was getting into, I started bouncing between my parents. Near my 18th birthday, I was dropping out of school and going to raves. I started experimenting with any drugs I could get my hands on. This new life and starting addiction was not cheap, so I started on my very long road of ever-escalating crimes, starting from petty thefts and stealing cars, eventually to robberies. I got in with a group and got a job at the rave I'd been frequenting, and at first it was basically working a coat check and cleaning, but I soon started selling drugs for the owner. Sadly, I excelled at this, and my addiction accelerated. The further I moved up in this world, the further I pushed my family away, until even the two most important people in my life, my brother and my grandma, my brother, who had always looked up to me, stopped coming to visit, and even though he meant the world to me, I'd use his ID to get out of trouble. Because of this, he wouldn't even talk to me for a few years. The biggest blow would come from my grandma, she was my best friend, mentor, and was always there for me. But I would constantly break promises to her and break her heart, till one day she stopped me at her door. She was crying and told me she couldn't watch me kill myself any longer, and she closed the door. I never saw her heart breaking or the hurt that I had caused. All I saw in my addiction was that they were abandoning me. It was everyone else's fault. So I did what I always did. I ran away, and I ran away to crystal meth and crime for many years. During these years, the streets and jails were my only home. Eventually, this life got hard, and I got tired, so I tried my first attempt to quit. I got my first real job that would become my passion, woodworking. I built things, and this truly made me happy. I met a woman that would become my wife. I had 2 beautiful little girls. I had my family back. My brother was starting to forgive me, and my grandma and I started visiting each other regularly. Sadly, while I was away, she had gotten very sick, but you could literally see her spirits lift when she saw not only me, but the family I had brought to meet her. My life was perfect, except I wasn't truly sober. I still drank, smoked weed, still wore masks, and still bottled up every emotion. I figured as long as I stayed away from my meth, I was good. I never knew about AA meetings or the Brotherhood. I had no one to talk to, but as long as my little perfect bubble was there, I was good. But then it began to crack. My marriage fell apart. My father and I came to blows. I ended up back in jail, and then they took away my daughter, all in rapid succession. When they finally took away my visits, I just quit. I ran right back to where I had been before. Within a month, I lost my job, all of my friends, and soon after I was homeless again. I quit seeing my grandma and my brother. Everything I had gained was gone, so I went back to selling drugs. And this time I got caught. Charged with trafficking and possession with intent, I had now lost everything once again, including my freedom and hope. Until I heard about drug treatment court. My life had become the streets, jails, and most likely death. And for the next 1 to 2 years, it was going to be jail. So when I heard about drug court, my junkie mind automatically thought this was an easy way out. If I only knew what I knew now, it was going to be anything but easy. I believe a part of me truly wanted to get better, but the intent was to get out of jail, and I carried this mindset when I got accepted and released. Just as with most of life, I put just enough effort in to just skim through. Thankfully, the counselors at Simon House, where I was sent to reside and do their program, as well as the drug court caseworkers, Pete and Claudia, they all saw through this. My time at Simon House, even though I'd eventually get kicked out from, has so much gratitude from me. Between the counselors, Nancy and Carrie, as well as a few others, I began to not only learn about my addiction, but most importantly about my sobriety and life skills, of which I truly had very little. In my first week, I also discovered the most important part of my continued sobriety, the brotherhood. I had nothing, and for once I had random strangers want to be my friend, to get to know me, to actually be there for me, even before I needed them. I remember trying to stay in my own head and be alone, but these weirdos at Simon House would follow me and find me. It kind of freaked me out, but it worked. I stopped trying to escape. I never knew it at the time as it was early sobriety, but the staff and brothers would fight for me. I broke so many rules while I was there, but apparently Nancy saw something in me, even if I didn't see it. She fought for me, and that's why I did graduate. Despite this, I never made it to graduation. With the help of Pete, I was moved to the Dream Center, but unbeknownst to everyone, my fears had been building. I was afraid of people, afraid of failure, and afraid of success. And I once again ran. I relapsed and AWOL'd from drug court, and this time I was going to keep running, except for that damn brotherhood. Pete, my caseworker, was messaging me regularly, my brothers were messaging me, and then 3 of my best friends really drove it home that I had to come home. Jason, Terry, and Jeff. Both are huge supports even to this day, and what they both said showed me that my actions didn't only affect me, but that I was now a part of others' sobriety, and that I had people that actually cared. Even with all this love and support, my higher power had to still step in and have the police help me turn myself in. My mind told me that I was pretty much screwed, but Pete and Claudia and the rest of the drug court hadn't given up on me, and my time in jail this time was different. I was halfway in both worlds. And sobriety had pretty much ruined my drug life, and I just couldn't relate to my old crew. I was released to the Dream Center, and I was about to truly begin. I didn't have this, and I most definitely couldn't do it on my own. I started working closely with Pete, and I learned about surrender and acceptance. I had to surrender and let go of all of my shames, guilt, and accept that not only could I be happy, but I deserved it. I opened up and became honest about my fears. My biggest fear came out. It had stopped me my whole life from making friends, meeting people, and even getting a job. I have what they call social anxiety, and mine was bad. I couldn't talk to groups, let alone even 1 or 2 people. Even now, when I agreed to share my story here at the church, I was pretty much sure the world was going to end. In my mind, it still might. And if it does, you all have my apologies. Shortly after I started working on myself truly, my eyes were opened even further by the passing of one of my best and oldest friends. He was a true brother who was my best man at my wedding, but had also been battling his addiction. He died of an overdose to fentanyl, and if you knew him like I did, he was the last one you would ever thought to die of an overdose. In my eyes, he was indestructible. This had just become very real, and I fought hard to not run away. By this time, I was still working with Pete on a bunch of things, and one of my goals was to visit my grandma so she could see that I was sober. Sadly, a month after my friend died, she would pass away also. This hit me hard, and the guilt came back. Without my brothers and my ex-wife, this could have taken me out, but a change had started. Soon after, I got a job, which had always been beneath me before, but getting that dishwashing job did something amazing. I'll never be able to repay them, for they brought back my smile and a purpose. I was now doing something. I was working, going to counseling regularly, and dealing with everything. And in February this year, I would face my biggest challenge. My ex-wife was still in the drug scene heavily, and for this, she would pay with her life. Her murder hit me hard. I'd always protected her, and all I wanted to do was hit the streets and find out who killed her. Guilt and shame for not being there was all that I felt. But Pete was there instantly. And the brothers, they wouldn't leave my side. My best friend drove from Kelowna that night because he knew what I'd do. I always ran. But this time I surrendered, I prayed, I asked for help. I truly believe that everything happens for a reason, and even though these 3 deaths in a row hit me hard, I was finally allowed to see my daughters at the funeral. And I was reminded that I now needed to be there because they only had me. Shortly after this, I came upon a pamphlet at the Dream Center. It was a woodworking program through the drop-in center. I loved the dishwashing job, but this was my dream, to get back into woodworking. I read through it, and my heart sank when I read the restrictions. There was an age limit and a criminal record check. It seemed every time I tried to get ahead, there would be trials and hurdles. But I brought the pamphlet to my casework at the Dream Center and to Pete. Thanks to them, I got accepted into the safety course needed for acceptance into the wood shop program. I was told my age wouldn't be a problem, but sadly my traffic charges was probably going to stop my application. I decided I would give it my all, even if I didn't get accepted. I scored the highest marks in the class and was in place with 3 others going for the program. I faced my fears and went through 3 interviews and impressed them enough to become the first person with my level of criminal charges to be accepted. I'm now in the second of a 3-month apprenticeship work training course, enrolled in my first year cabinet apprenticeship. I still have to take the entrance exam, probably in the next week or 2. When I look at the beginning, all I saw was an unclimbable mountain, but a very wise man told me to ignore the mountain. Just keep your eyes straight and take each step. And now I look at that mountain and it's not so insurmountable. From being lost, depressed, and filled with guilt, I now smile so much more. I have the beginning of a career. I have an amazing, beautiful fiance who supports me daily through my addiction and my sobriety, and has re-shown me how to love again. The best support system I could ever have, the most amazing assortment of brothers that are the truest family I could ever hope for, and I have a future. Thank you all for allowing me to face my fears and share my story. I hope it's helped some of you, because you all have surely helped me. My name is Rob, and I'm an extremely grateful addict.